All right. Hey, BATT Family. Today, we are going to record a very special mini episode with a guest that we are absolutely stoked to have on. How you doing, Scott? Are you excited for this?
Oh, I'm losing my mind right now.
Cool. So, on this episode, we are lucky enough to have a conversation with the designer and publisher of some of our absolute favorite games. He's the president and one of the founders of Stonemaier Games, Jamey Stegmaier. Thank you so much for coming on board all the time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm happy to be here today.
I know we have talked about your games many, many times, and I've been working with MeepleSource at Gen Con now for years, and Scott's joining us this year as a GM. So, we really respect you and what you do, so we really appreciate you coming on. We do know that your time is tight today, so we're going to try and make this all worth it and keep it nice and concise. But Scott and I have been wanting to have more industry guests on to talk through all the aspects of the current situation that's affecting the industry, especially regarding tariffs and things that have already been produced. In your case, we're asking about what the economic effects are for the industry when focusing on games that have already been manufactured or what may just be in the queue to be printed, anything like that. We know there's a lot of news going on around this particular thing right now, and so we wanted to let you respond to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's dive in.
We know there are games on the water right now that happened when the policies went in place. So I'm super fan of Tokaido. I was jumping up and down when I found out that you guys obtained that one. So how does the recent goings on affect the recent releases and the related products? We've got the Rolling Realms products that are getting ready to come out. So how does what has just happened happen and hurt the things that are in the water?
Yeah, and I'm glad you're talking about the timing of it, because this is right now. It's all about the timing for if someone shipped something before the tariffs increased, if someone started working on something before the tariffs went into place, or in many cases, I think you guys know this, that when we work on a game, we work with the manufacturer for a long time before they even start printing anything. So the idea that it's a quick switch to U.S. manufacturing, which I've heard a lot of the last couple of weeks,
Yeah.
is definitely not that simple. But yeah, for at least the specific question you asked there about things that are on the water right now, so things being shipped from China to the US, that is definitely the most dire situation. We are currently not quite in that situation. We don't have anything quite on the water yet. We have some games ready to ship, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I know that there are publishers out there who, when the tariffs were 20%, they initiated freight shipping on those products. And now that number has gone from 20% to 145%. And they basically, once those goods reach the shore in the U.S., if they have the money to pay for that additional 125%, or we'll use the number 145%, that's the total.
Sure.
If they have the money to pay for that, they can bring those goods into the U.S. If they don't have the money, if they don't have the cash reserves for that, they can't. And so some of those are probably crowdfunding games where maybe they have the money, maybe they've asked backers for more money. And many of them are games that they were hoping to sell in the U.S. to earn that money in the first place. They don't even have that cash yet to spend on the tariffs.
So anything that was on the water, it doesn't matter. It only gets charged whatever the rate is as soon as it hits.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. I believe, and I need to get clarification on this because I've heard mixed things. I think if it was when you're on the water, you do get to, this is what I've heard. I've heard that you get to look at the lower of the two numbers, but I don't entirely know if that's true. I will, maybe we'll put that in show notes or something, because that is a great question that I need to know the answer to, and I don't.
Sure. So when you went ahead and already had things produced, because FinSpan came in at the beginning of the year, and now it sounds like you're in that kind of middle waiting period for Tokaido's and everything's hit, and then we have Vantage coming later in the year. The tariffs as they existed would not have applied against FinSpan Tokaido since they already were here versus anything coming in the future.
Right. And this is actually where it gets a little bit nuanced. I'm wondering about my own question here, because for Tokaido, we had a shipment leave China right as the initial 20% tariff went into place. And for one of those containers of Tokaido, we did pay around $5,000 in tariffs once it hit the US. We are contesting that payment, and our freight shipper thinks that we can get that payment back. Maybe it is because of that timing.
Sure.
Now, for us, the bigger impact for the things that aren't on the water yet are around 250,000 units of reprints, like Wingspan, Wormspan, our second printing of FinSpan, and you mentioned Vantage there, new game. We started working on these in January, at least for production. And for Vantage, I've been working on it for almost a decade now. So we've been working with Data for a long time on that. And that 250,000 units, those are the ones that we are getting very close to being ready to ship. And so no matter what, unless the tariffs go down between now and when they actually arrive in the US, we are on tap to pay 145% tariff on those goods shipped to the US, which for us is about 1.5 million in tariff taxes.
Oh my goodness.
Which is
enormous.
Are you having any concerns with your current stock levels? Because we know that you house and distribute out of St. Louis. Are you worried about what that's going to do for consumers?
Yes. Yeah, there are a couple different levels there. Part of it is to our current inventory levels. That's kind of the heart of the question.
Yeah.
For some of those goods, we have a decent stock of wingspan right now. We have an okay stock of wormspan, and we're completely out of finspan. And so we are shipping finspan. When it is ready in about 3 weeks, we are shipping it because we're completely out of stock of it. And that means when we sell it to distributors, we are kind of making the choice to very barely increase the cost to distributors. I think we're aiming for a couple dollars.
Sure.
Which does increases at every level when distributors sell to retailers, when retailers sell to consumers, but we're not increasing it anywhere close to 145%. And so we're trying to minimize that impact, even though we'll largely be just breaking even on finspan sales to distributors. For Vantage, the first wave of shipping is largely just for direct sales anyway. We've split the production into 25,000 units and then another 25,000 units. And so we are hoping by the time that second 25,000 unit print run of Vantage is ready, which should be mid-June, and maybe by then things will be a little bit different and we can afford to sell it at the price that we wanted to charge to distributors and retailers.
Just for clarity for listeners that may be coming in not as familiar, when we're talking direct, that is you as Stonemaier essentially sending directly to the consumer. They bought off your web store, something like that, versus a distributor who's going to go to Miniature Market or Amazon or whoever else and sell that direction.
That's exactly right. And I think Finspan's a good example here. Finspan, because the math is clean, Finspan's a $50 game. If we sell Finspan on our website or on Amazon, but we primarily focus on our web store, then we're selling to you for about $50. Whereas if we sell Finspan to a distributor, we sell the game to them for $20 so that they can mark it up a little bit, and then they can sell to when they sell to retailers, and then retailers can sell it up, can mark it up to consumers back up to that 50.
So that means that the tariffs, regardless, when the product hits the shores, you are getting nailed that cost. And then depending on the sales channel depends on how much of that margin actually gets eaten by the tariffs.
That's exactly right. And I'm glad you highlighted that. I know we can repeat that as many times as we can, but the key is that it is the business that is importing the product into the U.S. after it was made in China that is paying this tariff fee to the U.S. government upon arrival, or they don't pay it and they don't get that product. They don't get to bring it into the U.S. at all.
What can we do, our listeners, anyone that happens to come upon this podcast, what can we do as consumers to help you and our other favorite board game creators?
It's a very generous question to ask, and a lot of people have asked that recently. I really appreciate that. I think there are a couple things that you can do. One is if you are if you're feeling compelled to do so, then you can two steps. One, you can be informed about the subject. So anyone that's listening to this podcast right now, you are being informed about this. That's great. You can also read up about it. I have a bunch of articles on my blog where I talk about it. There's also some articles out there that are unfortunately full of misinformation. So that convolutes the whole thing, but if it's an article on the Stonemaier Games website, I can assure you that I fact-checked it, and it is accurate. So that's part of it. The other part of that is if you are compelled to do so, you can call your representative, your local or state representative, and say that tariffs are impacting you and businesses that you care about. The last step is if you have a gaming budget for the next few months, I would recommend splitting that between retailers and publishers. So spend a little bit on publishers for inventory that they currently have in stock. Help them out by doing that, and then spend the other half on a local retailer or your preferred retailer that you really care about, and support them a little bit. Because I think the retailers are going to be the ones that are really going to be hurting in a few months. It is the publishers that are hurting right now because they can't bring their goods into the U.S. without paying a tariff.
Fantastic.
In that vein, I've followed along on the champion emails and the ambassador emails, and I've been doing that for a very long time. But you've stated in the past that your minimum order quantities for a print run are 1,000 units, and you try to have 500 back in stock requests before you do any kind of reprints. Stonemaier is fairly notorious for keeping all of your product SKUs in stock and not letting anything go out of print. Is that a strategy that you're still able to plan for? Do you think you'll need to actually aim for higher print runs and back in stock requests? Or would you finally consider, maybe something just goes out of print?
It's a really good question. And I should, just to be fair for those of you who maybe go to our web store right now and see some stuff that's out of stock, like Finspan is out of stock, I believe, on our web store right now. We try to keep things in stock, but sometimes there's a little bit of a delay. That we have been actively working on reprinting Finspan for a couple of months now. But in terms of intentionally letting something go out of stock or out of print for a while, I think that it is more likely to happen now if the tariffs continue. And probably connected to, usually this is the time of year where we start to think about how many units we want to print for the holidays. And normally it would be our biggest print run of the year because we sell a lot of things in the holiday season. Here, it's just, unless the tariffs decrease in the next few weeks, it will just have to be a lot more conservative than normal. And so we'll probably see products go out of stock before then and maybe after the holiday for quite a while. And maybe somewhat strategically for some games and less intentionally for other games.
Now, when it comes to like all the increased costs that are going on, how are these costs affecting your future plans? How are you looking at it when you're designing a game? Take Tapestry. You have all those fantastic buildings that are in Tapestry.
Right.
With everything that's going on right now, are you having that affect your choices of what you decide to work on? Or is it kind of one of those things that you put on the back burner and just kind of like, let's hope?
Yeah, there is certainly a certain amount of hoping for a better future, but still also planning for it. And here's the kind of the catch-22 about these tariffs. Like I mentioned, that $1.5 million. If we shipped everything in the next few weeks to the U.S. and we pay that $1.5 million, that is money that I would love to have to invest in something other than just taxes. We already pay taxes to the government.
Right.
We pay a lot of taxes to the government. By applying the tariffs, companies have less money to spend on U.S. manufacturing or other manufacturing options. Or maybe part of what you're referring to here is we could maybe change the components in our games, even if we're still making some of them in China. Currently, the state of U.S. manufacturing, it's largely geared around printed products. Like we can print cards here. We can do that. Mm-hmm. It's more complicated. We can print punch boards. Somewhat we can print game boards. Game boxes, like the standard two-piece game box, requires 3 different machines. One to print the paper, one to assemble the box, and one to put the paper around the box. It's very rare to see that in the US, and the quotes that I've been given, even just for that standard box, are really, really high. So I think there are solutions to work towards, but I think they would ideally involve some level of government subsidy and incentives rather than taking all the extra cash reserves away from us that we could otherwise invest in that type of manufacturing or even just the assembly process.
And I imagine that part of the reason you are trying to continue to print where you are and frankly subjecting yourself to the extra costs and the shipping time and everything is because as gamers, we're all pretty finicky. I know we like our stuff to match. I know a lot of us, Scott and I definitely, both come from competitive backgrounds where color matching has to happen so that way there can't be the unfair advantage, you don't know what's coming, etc. Am I right in assuming that that's a bigger deal when looking at manufacturing, especially when you have stuff like the World Series of Board Gaming that's going to need perfect copies? And then, again, is that changing the size of print orders right now to get that specific consistency?
That is a fantastic question because we have a 13-year partnership with Panda Game Manufacturing. They're a Canadian company. They have their main facility in China. We have a wonderful partnership with them. And just to sing their praises for a moment, I think they have consistent quality. They have great communication. They treat their employees well. They treat their clients well. They're a wonderful partner. For example, Wingspan. Wingspan is a whole line of products, 3 expansions. We're working on the 4th expansion, the core game. There's you mentioned the color matching. There's also matching the exact shape of the corners of the cards, matching the card stock. And for a new game, there's a little bit more of a possibility of making it somewhere else because we haven't set a precedent for that new game brand yet. But for Wingspan, we need to match all the other versions of, or all the, not the versions, but all the different expansions, all the Wingspan content that we already have out there. That isn't feasible to do somewhere other than Panda. And yeah, it does put all of our eggs in one basket. If something happens specifically to Panda, that would be very difficult. I haven't planned for that, and that's on me. But yeah, that matching of past products is incredibly difficult to move to a new facility or a new factory.
I think Wingspan is such a fascinating example as well because I don't know how many games exist out there on the scale of Wingspan that people wear their cards out so frequently to the point where you've just offered replacement decks. And I can't imagine you could do that by going to a different location.
Right. One time in our history, we tried to make a game. We tried to make Euphoria at a different facility. I can't remember. It's been so long. I can't remember why, but I know it was Ludofact in Germany. And they did a great job. They made a beautiful game, but the cards were a slightly different size. Their corners definitely did not match the original cards. You couldn't shuffle them in. And so it means that if someone bought that version of Euphoria, I believe it was the second printing, and then later on they bought the expansion for Euphoria, you can't shuffle the cards together. They don't match. And for Wingspan, yeah, that's not only is it a matter of buying expansions and expansion compatibility, but it is a matter of people playing the game so much that we want every card that we ever print for that game to match as closely as we can possibly manage.
Yeah. Does that get into the realm of counterfeiting? Because again, Wingspan is another one of those games that has been fairly rife for counterfeits. I'm assuming that is something that by maintaining that consistency, you can fight against that.
It does help to a certain extent. Counterfeiting is at a new level at this point where sometimes you don't even have to actually print anything to counterfeit a product these days. You can just list it somewhere online and someone might buy an empty box. They don't know what they're buying by the time you ship it to them. But actual counterfeiting, yeah, that does present at least one of the signals to someone that they may not have a real version of Wingspan or its expansions. And that is something that people have brought up a lot about China. A lot of, I would say, somewhat stereotypical accusations about what China is have come up a lot in this conversation. And one of them is, oh, China doesn't protect intellectual property, China counterfeits games. While it is true that counterfeits for our games, including Wingspan, do seem to originate in China, it is not the Chinese government who is like actively counterfeiting Wingspan. It is a person or a company who decides to do it. And because there are facilities to do it in China, that's where they do it. And we've actually found that China has trademark and copyright laws and protection that are pretty similar to the US. We have to pursue them like we would in the US if we find someone's violating it, but we've had great success in having counterfeit products taken down once we discover them.
You had discussed earlier about getting involved and making sure that we're all up to date as to where people's inconsistencies on what's going on with the shipping and the cost and everything like that. What did you use for your resources? So in case someone wants to do that just the same.
It's a pretty broad range of resources. Some of it, it's in my most recent article, some people have said, oh, why don't you stop using child labor and slave labor in China? I know that Panda doesn't, but it was a very awkward conversation, but I went to Panda. I was like, hey, I know you don't do this. Can you prove to me that you don't do this? Mm-hmm. And they have had certifications and proper investigation isn't quite the right word, but that sort of thing where they have investigators come to their facility to verify that they are complying with proper labor laws and things like that. So Panda has that. And also I found a really interesting website that talked about the concept of modern slavery. And I just found some really interesting data about that. There are instances of that in China, but the instances actually appear at a pretty close comparable rate to instances of modern slavery in the US tied to our penal system here. So it's actually a really interesting research rabbit hole to go down. Also, part of it is just going to the person, because like you guys reached out to me, you can reach out to anyone in the game industry and get the actual facts of the matter. Someone wrote on my blog that Root was made in the US. I was like, oh, I didn't know that, but Root doesn't have a lot of, it doesn't have plastic components. Like maybe they actually found a way to print it in the US. So I reached out to Patrick Leader Games. I said, Patrick, hey, somebody said this. Do you actually make Root here? And how are you doing it? I'd love to learn. He wrote back and he was like, absolutely not. I don't know how that rumor got started, but we don't do it. We make it in China. So someone was just, I don't know if they were actively spreading misinformation or maybe they saw it from a misinformed source. Sometimes, I just go straight to the person and ask them and I get the answer.
It's been very interesting to have conversations with individuals because people think that we can just instantly start an industry here in the United States. I've seen so many of your games. I know how particular and how intricate a lot of those things are. That means those are molds, those are dyes, that's working on color correction and all that stuff. And you can't just pick up and move it into the United States because you'd have to test everything. And that costs millions of dollars and time. I think what I was reading somewhere that someone said like 5 years, like it'd be 5 years before they could probably make sure that what was being produced here in the United States was of the same quality as what they're currently getting from their Chinese manufacturers.
I think that's accurate for some components. There's also, I think the glimmer of hope here is that there are a few manufacturers in the US who are already operational. And I wrote in my recent post that I think they probably would like more business. And maybe with more business, they could scale up a little bit better. They include Delano, Cartamundi, which makes mostly Magic the Gathering. I don't know if they're actually looking for more clients. And Ludofact still does have a facility in the US. They are active facilities. I am trying to learn more from them, but they haven't responded all that much recently. So I'm sure they're swamped. But I think there is the potential there. Yeah.
I know there's companies like the Game Crafter out there that they very specifically print just card games. But when you're looking at the construction of a game, and it's something that as just podcasters we get asked about, and I'm sure you get talked about significantly more, but that idea of when you're looking at a board game as a product, it's the board, it's the cards, it's do you have tiles, do you have minis, do you have standees, do you have multiple editions that have all these things, and that idea of trying to get everything moved over here or even produced in the same facility, because I know most dice, even with Panda, from what I have heard in the past, is Panda outsources most of their dice because they don't have that production. So you're still requiring multiple industries to put together this very custom box that would be so difficult to do here.
But I think you're touching upon one of the amazing things about having a global infrastructure for these games, and or global something that goes beyond a single facility. Right, that even Panda, that has a very robust facility, they are still outsourcing certain components to other factories that they vet and make sure they're doing a good job. I think that's okay. I think it's okay that not everything is made in our backyard. The one counter to that I do hear is, or that I think is worth pointing out, is that 65% of our sales, our major market is in the US. And so it would be nice to make more stuff here, because we're not selling any English language games in China, but we're making them all in China. So a little bit, I think there are definitely merits to having a little bit more of a balance between the two, but it would probably still involve making many of those components, those more custom components that you're talking about, the custom dice, the miniatures, even the nice screen printed wooden pieces that we see in a lot of games these days. Those could be made in China, and then in the US or somewhere else, we could make the boxes, the cards, the player mats, the boards, things like that. I think there is a healthy balance to be found here, but unfortunately, the current tariffs are on everything. They're on finished goods, they're on materials, they're on machines, they're on everything. And it goes back to the matter that we talked about earlier, where anything that is already in production, companies are going to get hit so hard by the tariffs that they're not going to have that money to invest in other options in the foreseeable future. They may not even exist as publishers within a few months.
There's one aspect of this that I haven't asked a question about, and Scott hasn't hit on it yet either, is the idea of, well, make it all there and then ship it over and then assemble it here. Does that change the difference of here's all the parts versus a final assembled product?
If it is purely assembly, as it stands right now, you would pay tariffs on the cost of those materials and then bring it into the US. The tricky part there is that you need to print the box in the US then, because then if not, you're taking up just as much space in the shipping containers as a fully completed game to bring it over here. In fact, you're taking up more space because you haven't put stuff in that box yet, probably. I think that is the first step that I'd love to see, and that I'm trying to discuss with some companies here in the US, of making the box here, handling the assembly here. It doesn't avoid the tariffs, because you're still paying the tariffs on those materials and those components, but it's bringing something to the US, or something more to the US. It's adding cost and time, but it's something.
I know we're at our half hour, and like we said at the start, we want to respect your time.
That flew by.
I know, right? It's been a very good conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to just mention or bring up, or just you've been calling out and supporting other publishers or manufacturers recently? Is there anything else you'd like to just throw on the end of this here?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. I'll stress again, because I think it's the main point that's happening right now, that it's the companies who have already started production, and who started production before the tariffs even existed, who are really hurting right now. We'll be okay at Stonemaier Games. At least we'll be able to weather the storm for a little bit. But there are some companies that I think are really suffering. And if you hear from those companies, I hope that you can trust that I think they're being honest about that. I think the vast majority of them are not trying to manipulate. They're just backed into a corner right now. Is there anything else that you guys want to know that's on your mind that you're questioning right now? I'm happy to offer some transparency on anything.
Man, I mean, honestly, I don't. My big question, and it's off topic, but we know we love your games. Of other publishers, what is currently hitting your table? We asked that of a couple other publishers and people that we've talked to, and you being so insightful with and how incredible all your games are. I can't believe how many, when I look at my shelf, are Stonemaier games.
I own all but one Stonemaier game.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
You guys are on the top of my list. Roxley's on the top of my list. Druid City Games is on the top of my list. I mean, like, you guys make incredible games. What hits your table that's not yours?
Yeah, the most recent, very, very recent games that I played this week were a game from the Game Crafter, actually, called Mall Cop. It was a 2-player hidden movement game where there's a shoplifter trying to hide from the mall cop. I had a lot of fun with it. I like hidden movement games. And I also played a game that I read about on the Space Biff blog called Here Lies. It's a cooperative game where players are trying to solve a mystery together, and you're trying to communicate with an investigator. It's a little bit like Mysterium, but there's many different ways to communicate instead of just communicating through visual cards. And then I am playing a digital game called Blueprints right now that I'm having a lot of fun with. Yeah, kind of a tile placement game.
I'm on day 28 of Blueprints right now.
You're deep into it.
I found it and I went, this is insane.
It's on my Steam wish list, but I need to get through my
you
stuff.
just need to get into it. Yeah. Biggest reason why I asked that question is because I definitely believe in the quote, a rising tide raises all ships. I love the features like, buy directly from the manufacturer. So like go to Stonemaier, buy a game from them, go to Druid City, they're on All Play, but go to them, order that way, and then go to your local game store. It's going to help everybody during this time and period.
So my last question for you, and I'm going back to your last live stream. You had asked people, what game would you see Stonemaier have had printing in the past?
Oh yeah, yeah. Do you have one?
Would you be interested in going and finding Scotland Yard and redoing Scotland Yard?
Ooh.
I do bring up Scotland Yard a lot as a game that's
Comes
been
up a
around for a long
lot
time.
on your Sunday sit-downs, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's one of those games that I feel I haven't pursued it. Like it's one of those games that I feel like has just been in print for a long time in a variety of different forms. But maybe it's out of print. I don't even know. I haven't looked into it.
I haven't seen it in a while, so
You haven't seen it? It's a really special game to me. I don't know if it's as marketable as I would hope it would be at this point, especially since it's been around for a long time. Have you played it?
I've actually never played it.
Well, if you're ever at Geekway to the West, well, I'll bring my copy and we'll play my 25-year-old copy of Scotland Yard there.
I'm going to take you up on that. I need to make it down there anyway, but boy, that's a really good.
That's a nice offer. That's a really great offer.
Cool. Well, Jamey, thank you so very much for coming on. We really appreciate it. This has been a very fast half hour for us.
Yeah, thank you.
But fantastic information. I think it's been great.
Thanks.
And
Appreciate
if you have any of those resources or anything that you'd like us to link in our episode notes, we'll be happy to do that. And otherwise, your next thing coming out in the short term is Tokaido. You're re-releasing that and the new Automa pack for that. And then you have Vantage coming out later in the year.
That's right, this summer. Yeah.
Well, cool.
Awesome.
Thank you so very much, Jamey.
Take care.
Hey, everybody. This is Mark in the Future. We recorded our conversation with Jamey on Tuesday, April 29th, 2025, and today is the 30th. We have completed editing and had a couple of follow-up questions for Jamey. So I sent him those questions and he responded back. I wanted to make sure that those got put into this episode. In one of the early questions in the episode, we had asked about the timing of shipping items versus what rate of tariff actually gets applied to them. As a reminder, I had asked the question, anything that is on the water, they're going to get charged whatever the rate is when it hits shore. Jamey responded he had asked their freight company that particular question about boats already on the water, and their answer was pretty complicated. It largely comes down to timing. Jamey also asked if a container of games that departed from China now, when tariffs are 145%, arrive when the tariffs are lower, say potentially 35%, which rate would they pay? And the answer is that there is no official answer at this point from the government. So just more uncertainty and unfortunately no good clear answer. Additionally, he did provide us with an article that links all of his sources together. So we're going to go ahead and drop that in our episode notes. Go ahead and check that out. Otherwise, thanks for checking in. And it was great to have this conversation.